The Tolkien Road, Episode 80, The Silmarillion in One. Alright, go ahead. The Tolkien Road, 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 the Tolk
Hey there, fellow travelers. Welcome to the Tolkien Road, a long walk through the works and philosophy of J.R.R. Tolkien. On this episode, we provide a one-episode introduction to and walkthrough of the Silmarillion. This episode is made specifically for those of you who have always wanted to read the Silmarillion, but have never been able to, for whatever reason. Before we get started, why not hop on over to iTunes and leave the Tolkien Road a rating and feedback? It's a great way to show your support for the show and takes less than a minute. Thanks for listening, and enjoy. Hello everyone, welcome to the Tolkien Road. John here, I'm joined by Greta. Greta, what's new?
Hey, not much, what's new with you?
Not a whole lot. We're going to do something a little, something I've been meaning to do for a while actually. This is an episode that basically we're going to go through the whole Silmarillion in one episode. We've done like over 30 episodes, over 30 hours of content on the Silmarillion at this point, and I just wanted to provide one episode that was like a very brief walkthrough for those who have never read the Silmarillion, and or those who have tried and failed, and for anyone else out there who just wants to listen to us, go through the Silmarillion pretty fast.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah. So, So before we jump into that, I do want to say this. I have some resources for the Silmarillion that I think are helpful, in addition to this podcast, that you can find if you go over to truemyths.org/silm. So truemyths.org/SILM. And if you type that in, you'll get to a page that says Silmarillion Resources. And you're going to find there like a PDF called Getting Started on the Silmarillion, that will provide you with some content, that'll, in addition to this podcast, that'll help you get, wrap your head around how to approach the Silmarillion. It'll provide you some maps that you can't find elsewhere, which are just, exquisite works of art, if I do say so myself. And then you'll also find a link back to, of course, to this podcast, which you know about already. You can also find a link to my book, Tolkien's Requiem, concerning Beren and Luthien. Beren and Luthien is, of course, one of the chapters in the Silmarillion, and it may be the most accessible of all the stories in the Silmarillion, which makes it a shame that it's kind of plugged in the towards the latter half of the book, because it may have been really that it was like may have been the best place to start, or maybe the best place to start. Yeah. So I wrote the book in order to kind of connect the dots between that story and the rest, and some of the big points of the rest of the Silmarillion, and you can get that over there. It's now available in paperback and then MP3 audiobook and in PDF, in addition to Kindle. So lots of formats over there for that. And then in addition to that, there's a series of blog posts that I did on the Silmarillion, that each one of those is like a little guide to each chapter of the Silmarillion. So if you can't spend an hour listening to the podcast episodes we did, before you read it, which I'm disappointed that you can't. Yeah, I know. But we'll forgive you this once, and you can go over there and just find like a short little synopsis that you can read in less than 5 minutes before you dive in and try to read the chapter. So hopefully those things are helpful to you. Yeah. And then hopefully this podcast will be.
Yes. So, absolutely.
Ready to get talking about it, Greta?
I'm ready. If you're ready, let's do this.
Let's rock and roll. So I gave you a little assignment, and it was to come up with the Silmarillion in one sentence, like the story of the Silmarillion in one sentence.
Right.
So what do you got for me? Or do you want me to go first?
I want you to go first, because I kind of forgot about that assignment.
Uh-oh. Well, wait. If I go first, then you're just going to be like, yeah, what you said. So... do your best. Just wing it. Wing it then. I mean, the whole point of this is, like, there's no official Silmarillion in one sentence. right?
I guess that's true.
It's like, what if you were just pressed, which you are right now, to describe the Silmarillion in one sentence,
I feel pressed
to somebody who had never read it and was like, you have one sentence to convince me to read the Silmarillion, and I don't want to be sold on it. I just want you to tell me what the story is. You know, what would you tell them?
I would say it's basically a long, in-depth, and very thorough prequel to The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings.
Okay. All right. So that's one way of approaching it, and that's generally how most people, get told about the Silmarillion. Is like it's the prequel or something like that to The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, which really it's not the prequel. Not
prequel. I guess I should have said backstory.
Yeah, because
say backstory.
He started writing it well before he wrote. He wrote The Hobbit or The Lord of the Rings, right? It's kind of it's the backstory.
Yeah, it's the back. Then I said backstory.
But I think to call it just the backstory does it a disservice because it's really supposed to be its own standalone thing too. It's not just supposed to be here's some background that'll help you understand. These are stories that meant a lot to Tolkien and were kind of the starting point, the genesis of the world that contains The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. So in many ways, the Silmarillion is much greater than those two things. It is much greater. So not necessarily in the critical sense, but like just the scope of it is much greater.
Well, yeah,
right?
That's why I said very thorough.
Yeah, yeah. So
I tried.
Well, that's what you get for not doing the assignment.
I forgot. Sorry.
All right. Well, here we go. Here's mine that I did. I did my homework. Teacher, I did my homework. Aren't I special?
Well, to be fair, you didn't tell me. You only told me about this like an hour ago.
But it's one sentence.
I know, but it's supposed to sum up like a 1,000-page book in one sentence. That's crazy sauce.
Well, you didn't do it. You didn't even try.
Well, I tried right now. You might as well just hit the whammy button on me.
All right, here's my version. Okay. The Silmarillion in one sentence by John Carswell. All right. The Silmarillion is the story of the origin of Middle-earth, the awakening of the elves, and their epic struggle against the Dark Lord Morgoth, a.k.a. Melkor.
Yawn.
Yeah, there you go.
I'd be like, who cares?
And basically that's a haiku too, so I did a haiku and you didn't.
Are you for real?
No,
Is that
kidding.
really?
No, it's not really a haiku.
I say that sounded like too many syllables to me.
It's 4 haiku together.
See, I think
it's a haiku of haiku.
My definition was more accessible. I think more people would read it if I gave them my definition. Because people be like, "Who's Melkor? That's a weird name."
Yeah, but if you actually want to know what it's about, because there's everybody knows that the Silmarillion is it's most people know that the Silmarillion has something to do with Middle Earth, but when you start reading it, just from the first page, it's like, what the heck is this?
I know. Yeah.
What is going on here?
Right.
So anyway, I don't want to get in an argument about whose one sentence version was awesomer than the others. Everybody knows it was mine, so let's just not argue about it.
You're the Tolkien scholar, so I mean, there's no.
I'm not a Tolkien scholar.
Well, you're a wannabe Tolkien scholar,
kinda,
which is more than I am.
I'm just a Tolkien nerd.
I'm just a pretender.
Yeah.
I'm just here to make you look good and smart.
All right, if that's what you say. Okay, so chapter by chapter.
Chapter by chapter, yep.
Alrighty. We start off, and there's this little section called Ainulindalë.
Ainulindalë. Yep.
Right?
Are we saying that right?
Ainulindalë.
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 I knew
Lindalë.
I knew Lindalë. I did. Did you know Lindalë?
I did know Lindalë.
I knew her too.
Yeah.
How funny.
So Ainulindalë is AKA, also known as the music of the Ainur.
Right.
That's what it literally means.
Right.
And very simply put, it's the creation story of Arda, which is the world in which that Middle Earth is part of.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
And so Arda is what the entirety of the Silmarillion and all of Tolkien's works takes place on. Right. Okay. It's a magnificent chapter. Won't say too much about it. One thing that I will say is if you want to see a really cool graphic depiction of comic style depiction of Ainulindalë. You can go and find an old podcast episode we did with a guy named Evan Palmer who made a comic version of Ainulindalë, and it's
like a graphic novelette.
Yeah,
right?
like a little graphic novelette.
Yeah,
and it's great. It's magnificent.
Amazing. Yes, it's a
so
feast for the eyes.
I always recommend to people to check that out. It's because Ainulindalë can be very challenging the first time you read it, and so go maybe read that first if you struggle, or even if you haven't, just to see how he depicted it, and then go back and read Ainulindalë, and hopefully it'll make a little more sense to you.
Yep, that's a great suggestion. I recommend it.
Right on. Anything else you want to say about Ainulindalë? Or we got a lot of chapters to go through, so unless you got something really important to say.
Yeah. No, just music.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, basically it shows...
Basically, Iluvatar singing.
Iluvatar and then the Ainur, who are the like the kind of the gods he creates.
Right?
Yeah. Iluvatar is the god, like the uncreated god, the being of all beings, and then the Ainur are created beings. Yes. The created gods that he creates. Yeah. Right. After that, you have Valaquenta, and Valaquenta is like a catalog of the gods, of these gods who are.
It's like a meet the cast.
Exactly. Yeah. Now it's not the cast of the whole story; it's the cast of the gods, right? So of the great powers. So you basically, and we find out there that they're divided into the Valar and the Maiar. And the Valar are like the greater powers, they're the greatest ones, and there's only a handful of them. And then there's the Maiar, and there's lots of them, and they all are kind of subordinate, but they're still powerful, but they're subordinate to the Valar.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
We also learn a little bit about the bad guys, and Melkor being the main one, and that he was a Valar, one of the greatest Valar, and he fell in the music, like during Ainulindalë, he kind of had a moral fall, a spiritual fall, and now he's a bad guy. Yep. Now he is the bad guy. All right. Anything else about Valaquenta?
No, I think that's
right on. Okay.
Pretty well summed up.
All right. Chapter 1 of the Beginning of Days. So this is really kind of where the story kicks into story mode. Right. And chapter 1 is about the Valar creating the two lamps to light the world, and subsequently Melkor destroying them. So basically, early on, you have Arda, and there's no light, there's no source of light, and so they create the Valar create these two lamps, to be like gigantic lamps, to be the things that light the world, and so it's like perpetual day. And then Melkor destroys these because that's what he does. Yep. And that leads to the Valar creating the two trees of Valinor, which they don't light the world all the time like the lamps did, but they do give off. They do give off this very powerful light, but there's this kind of day and night thing that they do. And there's a silver tree and a gold tree, and they're like the most important things in the world. Yes. To the Valar. Right. Chapter 2 of Aule and Yavanna. Aule and Yavanna is basically, in my mind, it's the story about how the dwarves were accidentally created by Aule. Or basically how they were accidentally created. I guess that's the right way of putting it. Right. How they accidentally came into being. And it's also the story about where, like, we get hints at where the eagles and the Ents came from as well. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. We learn a little bit about Aule and Yavanna's tumultuous marriage. Yes. Yes, indeed. Or lack thereof. I don't know. Are they actually married or not? Maybe not. Their partnership. Yeah. They're kind of supposed to be, but never seems to work out with them. It's crazy kids. All right. So, chapter 3 is of the coming of the elves. Right. And this is where the elves, who are known as the elder children of Iluvatar, right, the first children of Iluvatar, right, who and they're immortal beings, they awaken in the far east of the world, right, very far from Valinor, and the elves find out about it, and you mean the Valar? I'm sorry, the Valar find out about it, right, and Melkor does as well, right. Yes. And so Melkor, being the bad dude that he is, he wants to mess the elves up before they even have a chance to kind of realize who the Valar are. And so the Valar wage this war against Melkor and kind of destroy his stronghold and arrest him, and they begin to guide the elves to the Blessed Realm. Right. Yeah. Yep. Spot on. That'll do it. All right, stop me if you think you need to add anything, so I'll just keep going. I know you will. All right. No looking at your phone. What are you doing?
I'm not. I have something I wanted to share about the next chapter.
Oh, okay, cool. Of Thingol and Melion, chapter 4. This is a love story about Elwë, who is one of the elf lords. He's one of the great lords of the elves, and he's also known as Thingol. And he is the leader of the Teleri, and he falls in love with Melion, who is one of the Maya, right? So one of these god figures.
Very beautiful.
Yes, and they decide they're going to stay in Beleriand instead of traveling over the Great Sea over to Valinor, and they found the kingdom of Doriath, and they have one child who is Luthien. Right, who is the fairest of all the children of Iluvatar.
Yes,
that's
correct.
I mean, after all, right? Yeah.
Theme song for this chapter.
Nice. That's right.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. That's my one contribution.
That's Greta's contribution. You're done. You're done.
I may be excused. Thank you.
Hey, so by the way, can you take your book off the table? Just because, I don't want all the noise to get picked up by the recording device.
Right.
We've got kind of a ghetto recording setup, so hopefully we'll upgrade that at some point. Good contribution. That basically tells us everything we need to know about chapter 4. Yeah. Party on.
I mean, I thought it was pretty great.
Right. Yeah. You could also do like Foxy Lady, the Jimmy, because
But that song's been like a running joke throughout.
Yeah, I know.
The Silmarillion. That's why I use that one.
But it's the whole Wayne's World connection, right?
Oh, yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Of course, that's Garth. One... That's Garth. No, Wayne, it's Dreamweaver, because the woman he falls in love with is dark-haired.
Right.
Just like Melion.
Right.
And so who would Garth's dream woman? That's the Foxy Lady woman. So
I don't know. How did you know that Melion was dark-haired?
I think it says she is in chapter 4.
Oh, okay.
I may be wrong.
I don't know. Whichever one of the Valar are blonde, that would be Garth's.
Yeah. All right. Anyway. Chapter 5 of Eldamar and the Princes of the Eldalier.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And this is the chapter in which we learn more about the divisions of the elves, and we also learn about their journey over the sea. We learn that a whole bunch of them decide not to make the journey for whatever reason. Right. A lot of them stay in various parts of Middle Earth, and then basically 3 groups make the final journey over the sea on this island ship called Tol Eressëa, the Lonely Island.
Right.
And
that Ulmo uprooted from the sea.
Right.
Which just shows you how cool and strong he is.
Which, exactly shows you how cool Ulmo is.
Mm-hmm.
So the 3 groups are the Vanyar, the Noldor, and the Teleri. And the Noldor are really the most in focus in the Silmarillion.
Right.
The Noldor are the kind of the most important group.
Yep.
And I'll say this. So some of we've already learned about Ale. You just mentioned Ulmo. We really got to mention Manwë too. Manwë is the other of the 3 most important Valar. So they're basically Manwë, Ulmo, and Valar are. Manwë is the Lord of the Skies. Ulmo is the Lord of the Seas. Ale is the Lord of the Lands, basically. Right. And they're the 3 greatest Valar. Yes. There's other Valar, but they're the greatest. Chapter 6 of Feanor and the Unchaining of Melkor. This is where Feanor, who is the son of the High King of the Noldor, right? Mm-hmm. And one of the a very skilled craftsman.
Right.
We learn some about him, and we learn also that Melkor, after a very long period of imprisonment in Valinor, in the Blessed Realm, where all the Valar live, and these groups of elves now, that Melkor is finally set free. Right? By Manwë. He thinks Melkor has learned his lesson after all this time, and so he decides he's going to set him free and basically let him, dwell about.
Because that sounds like a terrific idea.
Yeah.
Because even bad guys can turn good,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Why not? Well,
they can.
We get into kind of that discussion over in that episode. We won't get into it too much right now, but maybe a little bit of naivete on the part of Manwë.
Or maybe a little too much benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, but it is what it is. Chapter 7 of the Silmarils and the Unrest of the Noldor. And so in this chapter, we learn about Feanor creating the Silmarils. And these are really... They create a lot of jewels. The Noldor create a lot of jewels. They really love jewels. But these particular 3 jewels actually capture the light of the two trees.
Right.
Right. They actually hold the light of the two trees. They're really the marvels of Valinor. Everyone is just kind of like in awe of these things. They're holy objects, really. And they're the pride of Fëanor and the Noldor.
Yes.
And during this time, Melkor sees these things and he wants them for himself, and he starts to sow seeds of unrest and distrust among the Noldor and amongst the rest of the elves, and especially against the Valar. Right, he starts to make them think that the Valar are just using them in a way.
Right. Yes, that they don't really care about them.
Right.
Yeah.
Chapter 8 of the Darkening of Valinor. Melkor.
Wasn't this the chapter? Isn't that the chapter 2 that the? Oh no, never mind. Go ahead.
Well, in chapter 8, Melkor goes down south and finds this spider demon named Ungoliant.
Right.
And he enlists her to assist him in destroying the two trees.
Right.
And so they basically, while everyone's kind of partying somewhere else and the two trees are unguarded, Melkor and Ungoliant sneak up on the two trees and destroy them. In the process, they murder Finwë, who's the High King of the Noldor, and Fëanor's father. And they steal the Silmarils and hightail it
out of Dodge. That's right.
Yeah. So that's really where things, the story really starts to kick off.
Yeah.
Is there in chapter 8.
That's where what hits the fan.
Yes.
Really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Chapter 9 is of the flight of the Noldor. In that chapter, the Noldor give chase to Melkor against the explicit command of the Valar. So the Valar, even though Melkor just made off with the Silmarils that the Noldor, that Fëanor created, the Valar really don't want. They want the Noldor to kind of like play it cool, and they want to formulate a plan, to go find these jewels, to go get Melkor and find these jewels. But the kind of, remember, Melkor had been sowing these seeds of unrest and these seeds of distrust between the Noldor and the Valar. And so the Noldor are like, see, there you go again. And they decide they're going to go, whether the Valar want them to or not, they're going to go and chase Melkor down and get the jewels back. And so they actually take this oath, that if they don't, that they're going to resign themselves to the outer darkness and death if they don't get the jewels back. Right?
Dangerous oath. Yeah.
Very dangerous oath. So they give chase, and lots of other tragic things happen in that chapter as well. Chapter 10 of the Sindar. So we take a little break from where the action had been for the last several chapters in chapter 10, and the focus kind of shifts back to Beleriand, which is the far west of what is Middle Earth, but it's over the sea. It's basically where the elves departed from to travel over the sea to get to Valinor in the first place. And they come back to this realm of Beleriand. And if you look at the map in the book that they give you, it's of this realm, Beleriand, so that's where it comes from. But if you try to think of this in terms of where like Lord of the Rings takes place, Beleriand doesn't exist in that time, but it's kind of beneath the ocean to the west of like the land where the Shire is, right?
Yes.
In Lord of the Rings.
Yes.
So, but chapter 10 deals with the Sindar and their initial battle against Melkor as he returns to Beleriand and establishes a new stronghold for himself. The Sindar are the people of Thingol, and they're known as the Grey Elves because of how close they came to traveling over the seas, but the fact that they never left means they're not the Light Elves or the Grey Elves, right? So they're kind of halfway between light and dark.
Got it.
Right.
Yep.
Kind of halfway in light and darkness. So the Sindar fight a little battle with Morgoth. Not too much comes of it right there, but now they know Morgoth is back and he's a bad guy. And so Fëanor is the one that renames Melkor Morgoth, right? Which basically I think it means the black enemy. I don't have it right in front of me, but it's like the dark enemy or the black enemy or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah. Chapter 11 is not a very exciting chapter. It's of the sun and the moon and the hiding of Valinor. It's basically just the story of, okay, now that the world is in darkness again because they destroyed the two trees, how are we going to get some light? And so what they do is they take one of the fruits and one of the flowers of the two trees that are still salvageable, and they place them in the sky as the sun and the moon.
Right.
So that's where the sun and the moon come from. Chapter 12 is of men, and this is just the story of men who are the second children of Ilúvatar, the younger children of Ilúvatar. This is where they came, where we learn that they awaken as the sun rises, right? Because it's kind of like the scheme is like the elves are the people of the moon, and the men are the people of the sun, right?
Right.
And really that's a sign of weakness for men, because men, are scared of their shadow, scared of just like any darkness, and so they've got to have the sun to light, to kind of fully light the sky.
Interesting.
Anyway, chapter 13 is of the return of the Noldor. The Noldor in this chapter finally arrive in Beleriand in pursuit of Morgoth, and they make an assault upon Morgoth's stronghold, Angband, which is his new kind of castle in the north of Beleriand. It's not successful, and there's some deaths in this chapter. And after some time, Morgoth returns the favor and floods Beleriand with his minions, but they are defeated in turn. So there's these kind of two battles in chapter 13 that not a whole lot comes from. But what we do find out is that a long siege upon Angband begins. So there's kind of this alliance of elves that just kind of hangs out in the north, right outside of the gates of Angband, and has it under siege, kind of under guard and under siege, right? Chapter 14 is another, chapter where no plot really advances. It's some notes on the arrangement of Beleriand, and no real action takes place in this section. I mean, this is really one of those that probably could have been put in an appendix, in order to let the story flow a little bit more. But for whatever reason, it wasn't. So, you can, if you're reading through the Silmarillion and you come to this chapter, it's pretty much a snooze fest unless you want to just read about how Beleriand, what Beleriand is like. So you can almost consider that an appendix. Chapter 15 is of the Noldor and Beleriand. This is one where the Noldor settle into Beleriand, so they've been here a little while, and it's like, okay, we've got this place, Angband, under siege, and nothing much has happened, so they go ahead and they establish their little kingdoms and in parts of Beleriand that aren't taken yet. It's also the chapter in which Gondolin, the secret city, is founded, which is a secret realm of the elves, right? So that no one can figure out how to find their way to.
Is that the one where Melion has the thing of?
No, that's Dorioth.
Oh,
it's Dorioth.
So who's in Gondolin?
Gondolin is where Torgon lives. Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Chapter 16 is of Maglin, and Maglin is the son of the dark elf Eärendil. And basically, this is a story where at first you don't really understand how it fits into the overall scheme. It does take place in Beleriand during this same time, but it's basically the story of this kind of loner elf who marries the sister of the king of or maybe it's the daughter of the sister of the king of Gondolin, right? And then they have a son named Maglin, and eventually he's kind of a quiet, shady dude, and they come back to Gondolin and settle in Gondolin, and that's kind of there's a lot of tragic things that happen in that particular story, but that's when it kind of leaves. It's just like, and Maglin resided in Gondolin for a long time, and that's kind of where that's part of the story leaves off, and it's kind of this like, okay, why did you tell me this, and how's that going to turn out? So it's a good story, though. It is a good story, but it's stage setting for what happens in the future, right, too.
Right.
Chapter 17 is of the coming of men into the West. So this is, men had awoken in chapter 12, and now they're actually coming. They're actually arriving in Beleriand. And there's a couple of groups. There's basically 3 groups of men who befriend the elves, and they are known as the Eärendil, right? So there's lots of men, and many of them don't befriend the elves. Many of them have kind of fallen under the sway of Morgoth's minions, which he's kind of spread throughout the world.
Right.
And so, men, in large part, aren't so sure about these elves and the Valar and that kind of thing. But the Eärendil are the ones who kind of realize that the elves are their friends, and so become, their brothers in arms. So, and are welcomed by them in Beleriand. Chapter 18 is where the action really picks up again after several chapters that were relatively slow, and that's of the ruin of Beleriand. And this begins with the Battle of Sudden Flame, where the siege of Angband is broken by dragons and Balrogs and other minions of Morgoth, and it's just basically a huge disaster for the elves and the Edain. The siege forces are all scattered, and many important elves die, and many important men die, and then from this point, Morgoth really goes on the offensive. Right, he goes from being kind of holed up in his stronghold to going on the offensive and starting to take the battle to the rest of Beleriand.
And this is where Manwë really questions his decision.
Well, if we know, for all we know...
If I were Manwë, this is where I would begin to question my decision, letting him go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he's probably all like, well, guys, I mean, I told you not to go back. That's probably what he's saying to the Noldor.
That's probably true. Point the finger.
Chapter 19 is previously mentioned of Beren and Luthien, and this is another one of those stories that really stands alone. It's totally like in the flow of the overall story, but it's very readable on its own. And if you're going to start anywhere, honestly, this is where I'd start with this particular chapter, because not only is it very readable and it has kind of a clear beginning and end, but one of the main villains, in addition to Morgoth, is Sauron. Our good buddy Sauron from the Lord of the Rings. So if you're familiar with the Lord of the Rings, this is maybe the most natural jumping off point, right, is to go here. And again, I wrote a book about this story. If you want to go check that out, you can just go directly to it. It's truemyths.org/Beren, Beren. And you can find the book Tolkien's Requiem that I wrote about it and what this story meant to Tolkien. You can find that over there. So check it out.
Yeah, it's good. I read it.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. 2 thumbs up.
Thanks. I didn't even pay you to say that. Nice.
Free publicity.
I'll put that on the back cover. It's good. 2 thumbs up. Greta Carswell.
Co-host of
That's right.
Tolkien Road.
And wife of
and
author.
wife to the author.
Yes.
But no, seriously, that's good.
Thank you.
And that is a really fabulous story. It really is.
Yeah, it's
really good.
If the entirety of the rest of the Silmarillion was just written for just so that story would have a whole novel to go along with it, then it was worth it.
Then it was totally worth it. Absolutely.
Now, I'm not saying that's the case. I'm just saying that story is just so good.
Yes.
Yeah. But basically, in a word, Beren and Luthien is the story of Beren, the lone survivor of a small band of men who kind of survived the Battle of Sudden Flame, and then he falls in love with Luthien Tinuviel, the daughter of Thingol and Melion, right, who we mentioned before. And they are tasked, they have to go steal one of the Silmarils from the crown of Morgoth.
Right.
And so it's the story of how they managed to pull that off.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the price of Luthien's hand.
That's right.
Yes.
That's right. Chapter 20 is of the 5th battle near Naiath Arnoediad. It's also known as the Battle of Unnumbered Tears, and it's a last-ditch effort by the elves and the Edain to make war on Morgoth, right, to take the battle back to him. And although it starts off pretty well, it ends up in really being the greatest defeat they've suffered yet, and that's where things really start to go downhill quickly for the Noldor and all the other free peoples of Beleriand.
Yes.
Chapter 21 is the story of Turin Turambar. This is another one of those standalone stories, and this is a much more tragic story than Beren and Luthien. It does take place in that same flow, but basically Turin is a man who's descended from Hurin, one of the Edain, and he basically, even though he's a great and brave warrior, he just it's just like this story of like one bad thing happening to him after another, and a lot of it is through his own hubris and pride, but there's also just a lot of like the deck just seems stacked against him, like nothing seems to turn out right for him, and so it's it's really a story of this great potentially great man who seems fated to suffer pain and loss at every turn.
Sounds like a Job story.
Yeah, in a lot of ways it is. Yeah, except without the kind of happy ending that Job.
Right, I was gonna say without the happy ending.
Yeah,
it's a tragic Job tale.
Yeah. Chapter 22 is of the ruin of Doriath, and this is the story of Thingol's pride leading to the destruction of Doriath, which we mentioned that's one of the 3 great realms of Beleriand are Doriath, Nargothrond, and Gondolin.
Gondolin, right.
And Doriath is the one that's the oldest because it existed for a long time. under Thingol and Milion, who did not go back to the Blessed Realm with the rest of the elves.
Right.
And so it's, basically this is the story of how Thingol's pride leads to the destruction of Doriath. And again, things just continue downhill from there. Mm-hmm. Chapter 23 is of Tuor and the fall of Gondolin. So this is where Maglin comes back into the story. Maglin is, again, the son of Eöl, the Dark Elf. And Maglin, through a series of events, becomes imprisoned by Morgoth and gives away the location of Gondolin. And so Gondolin is destroyed, and at that point the elves in Edain of Middle-earth are essentially a remnant. Right?
Yeah, because Doriath and Gondolin are gone. Two of the three.
Doriath, Gondolin, Nargothrond, all gone. Right?
Okay, Nargothrond's gone?
Yeah, Nargothrond's gone as well. Yeah.
Oh.
I didn't mention that in the going through, but it's gone as well.
Okay.
Yeah. And then finally, chapter 24, the last chapter of the Silmarillion, is of the voyage of Eärendil and the War of Wrath. So Eärendil is one of the surviving Edain, and he's actually descended from Tuor, and he basically undertakes to sail. Things are so desperate that he decides he's going to attempt to sail a ship into the west to seek the aid of the Valar, which it's been tried before, but no one's been able to. But he's got Beren and Lúthien's Silmaril, the Silmaril they managed to steal from Morgoth.
Right.
And so he places this on the bow of his ship, and he is allowed passage into the Blessed Realm. And at that, the Valar assemble a great army that swarms Beleriand, and they throw down Morgoth once and for all. Right. So, and that's the end of the First Age. That is the end of the First Age of Middle Earth. I'll note the First Age of Middle Earth actually begins with the coming of the coming of the Noldor to Beleriand in pursuit of the Silmarils. Okay, so there's a lot of stuff that happens before the First Age. There's a lot of technically before the First Age.
Okay.
Right. There's a lot that basically chapters 1 through 9 all take place in sort of this prehistory period, right before the First Age. And then we have two more stories that are in the book that is sold as the Silmarillion. The first is Akalabaith, and this is the story of Eärendil's son Elros and the island kingdom of Numenor that he and the other Edain are given at the beginning of the Second Age. Akalabaith literally means downfall, and so this is the story of first kind of the rising of Numenor into being this like great kingdom of men, and it tells how they've over generations kind of decline and fall prey to Sauron through their own hubris, right? And through Sauron's treachery,
right?
So, and so this Akalabaith, starts in the beginning of the Second Age, and carries on through many years in the Second Age, and then finally you have of the Rings of Power in the Third Age, which is a brief synopsis of everything that happens after that, and it tells of the founding of Arnor and Gondor, which are the Numenorean kingdoms,
right,
of the remnant of Numenor in Middle Earth. So, we all know Gondor from Lord of the Rings. Arnor is like the sister kingdom of Gondor that existed in the north, where like the Shire is now, right in the Third Age. So right. The Rings of Power in the Third Age begins in the middle of the Second Age, just after the fall of Numenor, and it tells of basically the creation of the rings and the One Ring by Sauron, and then the last alliance of men and elves, and then how the One Ring eventually comes to be in the hands of Frodo and Frodo's and as well as what Gandalf did in the whole thing, and kind of in very brief form tells the story of how Sauron finally fell once and for all.
Right.
So finally was destroyed once and for all. So that's that whole book, the Silmarillion, that has just been staring back at you from your bookshelf for all these years and laughing at you in brief form. So now you have no excuse. Go read it.
No, yeah.
And if you don't have a copy, go buy it and read it.
Yeah.
And I hope you enjoy the heck out of it, because it's worth it. It's a hard book to get started on, but once you get started, you realize like, wow, this is really good. There's a lot of just fascinating stuff going on in this story. So, yeah. So, how about them apples?
Yeah.
All right.
Well done.
All right. Do you have anything you wanted to add?
No.
All right.
I think I'm good.
All right. Right on.
Yeah.
Right on.
I think if I hadn't already read the Silmarillion, I would feel very empowered.
Good.
To tackle it now. So
yeah. Well,
hopefully our listeners feel the same.
I hope so. Yeah.
Well done.
Alrighty. Well, thanks for listening, everybody, and
thanks,
we will
guys.
be back next time, picking up with The Lord of the Rings, Book 3, Chapter 1, a.k.a. the first chapter of the Two Towers, which is the departure of Boromir.
Yeah.
All right.
Sounds like a plan.
Yeah, we'll talk at you next time.
All right. Bye, y'all.
Bye-bye. Please remember to check out truemyths.org for show notes and plenty of other Tolkien goodness. Also, if you're enjoying the podcast, would you please leave the Tolkien Road a rating and feedback on iTunes? It's a great way to support the show and takes less than a minute. On our next episode, we'll resume our discussion of Lord of the Rings with Book 3, Chapter 1, The Departure of Boromir. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, the road goes ever on.